All right, we got it. All right, thank you very much for coming to Monetizing Premium Content, how to measure, analyze, and drive value from video. So we have a great group of panelists here. We're going to be talking about what works, what doesn't work, what some of the challenges are, trends affecting the video landscape and monetization. And so we're going to start by I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves, talk about your role, your company's role, and how you fit into the video ecosystem. So we'll start with Beth at the far end.
Good morning. My name is Beth Jacobson. I'm the Vice President of Product Strategy and Partnerships at 3 Pillar Global. We are a product development services company. We build software products and platforms for many companies across many different vertical industries. And particularly in the media and entertainment space, we've worked really closely with companies like PBS over the last 7 years to help them build out and co-manage some of their digital and video platforms and products, as well as companies like Black Arrow. I've been at 3 Pillar for 3 months. My background is in digital media and mobile. Prior to 3 Pillar, I was the GM of mobile at the Washington Post. And before that, I was at AOL and other various media companies like Cox and the Weather Channel Interactive.
Great. Dominic.
Sure. So morning, everybody. Dominic DeMeglio, Head of Video Distribution and Operations at CBS Interactive. I'm focused on the entertainment, sports, and news brands that we represent. So really sort of the CBS Broadcast Network brands. We represent the digital arm of those online, so CBS.com, CBSSports.com, CBSNews.com. As part of my role, I head up our ad-supported and transactional distribution partnerships. So on the ad-supported side, I run our CBS Audience Network, working with short-form partners like Yahoo and YouTube. And on the long-form side, working with MVPD partners such as Comcast and DirecTV. And then on the transactional side, working with the likes of Amazon and iTunes. As well, on my role, I also oversee video monetization and business intelligence for the group.
Great. Micah.
Hi, I'm Micah Gelman from Discovery Communications. I head up digital video strategy there, primarily focused on how we take our popular brands and extend them onto additional platforms and new ways of storytelling with that content that's not necessarily directly competitive with what we already have on television. So work on that. I'm working on a lot of the foundational work for globalizing our use of video and really having an understanding of how that's being used across the world as Discovery expands. So.
Great. And Campbell.
My name is Campbell Foster. I'm Director of Product Marketing for Adobe Primetime. Adobe Primetime is a modular TV experience platform that encompasses TV playback across screens, DRM, authentication, ad insertion, ad decisioning, quality of experience monitoring, and analytics. Combines a number of legacy Adobe technologies with some new special sauce. It is a modular platform, so customers can take the pieces of the stack that they want. They don't have to use the end-to-end solution unless they choose to. And in my role, I drive global go-to-market strategy for the product suite.
Great. And I'm Jonathan Hurd, a director with Altman Valandry and Company. We're a strategy consulting firm focused on communications and media. So, Beth, let's start with you. Let's start with the consumer perspective. So, what's happening with trends and consumer viewing that's causing monetization opportunities as well as challenges?
So I would probably posit that there's sort of the mobile revolution that's going on right now in video. There's this glacial shift that's now occurring, which I'm sure many people are aware of, where online video consumption has now, is moving very fast and furiously towards mobile consumption, most particularly, I think, on tablets. And I recently I read a statistic that from eMarketer that said I think there was a 54% increase in online video programming viewership that went from to tablet devices. So, there's 77% of all tablet users, which is about 113 million people, are now watching at least monthly video programming on a tablet device. So obviously what that means is there's this glacial shift that's going on with eyeballs from desktop and laptop to tablet and portable devices. The interesting thing is obviously what does that mean for monetization? And obviously that presents a lot of opportunities and a lot of challenges at the same time. I think there's also a little bit of a dichotomy going on because from what I understand as well, the advertising online ad spending has not shifted completely. So marketers, I think, are still allocating the bulk of their dollars towards online video, even though the eyeballs and consumption are going towards tablets. So I think right now it presents an interesting dilemma, right, for video programming entities and content providers and publishers who are recognizing in many instances, particularly with traditional media companies like newspapers, from my background, I understand that the holy grail right now is video in terms of where the audience is, where the engagement is. But in terms of the models around video, right, it's a wide open field in terms of how do you monetize it effectively, where are the highest CPMs, they still remain online, mobile's a little bit more challenging. So you've got an audience that's going in one direction and advertisers that aren't necessarily following. So it's really an interesting dynamic in terms of how do we stay ahead of it as over the next 3 or 4 years, video consumption on tablets will likely overtake online video consumption on desktop and laptops. And how do we prepare for that and actually get ahead of that in the market so we're there by the time that complete evolution happens?
Dominic and Micah, as the content providers here, and with this shift taking place, how are you seeing the monetization opportunities? And Beth kind of delineated into like traditional online on PC-based platforms, basically, or web-based platforms, let's say, versus mobile devices. What are you seeing there in terms of trends of ability to monetize across those various platforms?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the user and viewer consumer is shifting. For us, I think it's the challenge is really providing enough inventory on all of those platforms to really monetize effectively. But as far as the way we sell and the way we like to sell is that we take a full 360 approach to that, so that we're not really divvying up the platforms to a degree. We're looking at a sell through broadcast that filters into all of the assets of our content.
And I mean, the same approach in terms of trying to take that 360 view of selling and be able to give advertisers the flexibility to buy across platforms and essentially be agnostic, where the challenge I think we're having right now is, consumer demand and consumption is changing and moving more quickly than measurement and some technologies can keep up. Yeah. So for example, on mobile and tablets, where we struggle today is that the lack of sort of demo measurement. So for the last few years, we've been in a world where advertisers are trying to sort of take that TV model of buying against age and gender and translating that online. We've been working with OCR and VCE for the last 2 years. And so, mobile and tablets have been dragging or sort of lacking on that area. And now we're sort of on the cusp of getting that measurement coming Q3-ish this year. And I think that's going to be a big sort of opening up for us to be able to optimize our campaigns across. Right now, we're still having to sort of treat mobile over here as sort of a separate part of a buy, which is obviously not best when we're trying to optimize our campaigns.
Campbell, how far away are we from being able to measure and being able to report on demographics in a way that advertisers need?
Nielsen told us the same thing, that it's looking like Q3. They've been saying that for about 4 years, but it looks like they've done a lot more work in terms of product development and engineering to make OCR a reality, or to deliver on the vision that they've been talking about in 2014. So that's a really positive thing for the big broadcasters like CBS.
So a lot of the content that we're talking about that comes across digital platforms is viewed on demand rather than viewed live. There's obviously some live, but it's in the minority for a variety of reasons. But let's talk about that on-demand content and what's happening in terms of traditional DVR viewing, VOD viewing, on a set-top box versus on-demand viewing on digital platforms. What are the differences in terms of ability to monetize? What are the challenges that are introduced by each? And what are some? I've heard that there's been some big success and growth around monetizing in the VOD area, traditional VOD platforms. Yeah, how do those differ and what's going on trend-wise there?
Sure. I mean, I know for us at CBS, I think we're focused up on sort of, again, being agnostic to where people watch. I think DVR viewing has been a challenge for everyone in the industry in terms of a couple things. Half the commercials are fast forwarded through, but I think probably the bigger challenge is right now we only get credit through that C3 window. So there's been a big push in the industry. And, we've been very vocal about it, and we're hopefully moving closer and closer towards sort of C7 measurement, so we open up and capture even more viewing.
Just for the benefit of the audience, in case some aren't familiar, could you talk about C3, C7?
Sure. So the C3 window for TV viewing, essentially the way Nielsen counts it is if you watch something on demand with the same commercial load that is in the broadcast show within the first 75 hours after broadcast, you get credit for that. And what we're trying to push as an industry is to say, hey, after that C3 window, we should continue to get credit for people that are viewing all the way up through 7 days. And then additionally, just in terms of the on-demand viewing on the set-top boxes, VOD has also been historically a very difficult area for broadcasters and networks to monetize. And this past year, we've launched in the past few months dynamic ad insertion for VOD. So after that C3 window, we are now serving ads dynamically and monetizing it in a similar way than we are online.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think as an industry, we're seeing actually a shift kind of back from DVR to VOD, and I think that's really going to help our ability to monetize, especially after the C3 or C7 window, with Canoe in there and the connections that allow us to do that digital ad insertion.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think one of the things that's been really nice to see is that as the MVPDs have improving the set-top boxes, the interfaces, and making it easier for consumers to access VOD content, we're seeing the bigger area of growth actually in the VOD consumption.
And by MVPD, multi-channel video programming distributor, it's the cable operators, telcos, satellite providers lumped into one FCC term.
Speaking of the MVPDs, I think one important trend to watch in terms of DVR and ad skipping is that MVPDs are exploring giving consumers more choices in terms of the ad skipping. So the way it works today, if you have DirecTV or if you have Comcast and you DVR things and it's client-based, it's sitting there on the box, you're paying an extra 10, 15, 20, 25 bucks for that ability. They're exploring giving consumers cloud-based DVR, and this is something that Cablevision worked on in 2008, and there was some FCC action, blah, blah, blah. But this is starting to become a reality where you won't have to pay for the cloud DVR, but you won't be able to skip the ads. So the consumer gets to choose, I will pay an extra 25 bucks in order to skip the ads, or I'll just get it for free and I'll sit through the ads. So I think that benefits consumers because they have more choice in terms of how they want to watch SVOD.
All right, speaking of ad skipping, let me give a...
Our preference is they watch
Ours too.
Agreed.
Let me give a case study, and I know this isn't primarily a technology panel topic, but I think it's one of the challenges that is still faced by digital video. So I watch a lot of over-the-top video from HBO Go, Netflix, Xfinity app, the TV Everywhere app. And this is on my elliptical machine in the morning. When I'm using the Xfinity app, if there's a bad Wi-Fi connection, the program will come through okay, the video's a little low res, but the moment I hit an ad, wham, it starts pausing and buffering, and it has very difficult time delivering. So, from a user perspective, and obviously I know there are different platforms interacting there, but what's going on? How many of these challenges still exist in terms of the user experience, and how much is that limiting the advertising potential of these platforms as well?
It's certainly an issue. So often the creative is in a different video format than the stream. So you have one that's an HLS and the other is an FLV. So so there's problems with the encoding and the transcoding as you go from the content to the ad. So that causes a lot of the buffering. There's also problems with loading up a second player in order to facilitate the ad or to decision and deliver it. So a lot of those problems are going away with on-the-fly transcoding and sort of this back-end stuff that will bore the heck out of everybody here. So the industry is addressing a lot of those issues now. So on the technology side, we're aware of it, and we're working to fix this stuff, but that's more of a technology challenge, I think, than a business challenge.
Right. Do you get pushback from advertisers about, we're not seeing, certainly the inventory is a question or a challenge still, and the reach is a challenge, but do you get pushback on, gee, I'm not sure when I advertise on these platforms that consumers are actually seeing it at all, or is it sold in more of a lump purchase across platforms today?
No, I mean, I think the advertisers have been accepting of the measurement that exists today. I think they prefer to buy in a different way. Like I said before, sort of really focused on that age and gender verification. But at the same time, I think they have been accepting, and we've been able to sort of get them the right level of data so that they're comfortable that their buys are successful and their spend is worthwhile.
We can show them progress as these things are fixing themselves. I mean, obviously, all this technology is still very nascent, so challenges around it.
Great. So what are some case studies that have worked, and maybe there's some around authenticated viewing that we haven't really talked about. So authenticated viewing meaning TV everywhere. If you have a cable subscription, it gives you the right to watch a lot of programming that you otherwise wouldn't have the right to watch. What are successes there, or how does that compare to the other types of ad-based viewing we've discussed that may not require authentication?
Sure. So I think one thing that's important to know, one thing that is really coming out that's become clear in the last 6 months or so, is that authenticated viewers, so you go and you download the NBC Sports app, or you download Turner or whatever. You get the MVPD picker, you choose Xfinity or DirecTV, you enter your login credentials, and you go back to watch the programs. That's what we're talking about, just definitional level setting. Authenticated viewers watch more content, and they watch for longer. It certainly showed in the Sochi data. I don't know if you saw Rick Cordella's presentation this morning, and it really showed in the March Madness Turner data. And I don't know if that also held true with the Final Four with CBS. But the point is that once you do get over the authentication hurdle, people tend to watch longer. So it really boosts engagement rates, which creates more ad inventory, which makes more money, so everybody's happy. Unfortunately, the trend, so we're putting out a digital index report covering authentication, and this authentication rate, or the number of people that successfully log in after being presented with the MVPD picker, is still only around 38%. So year over year, that's up from about 25%, so it's getting better, but still there's a lot. So 2/3 of consumers go to that MVPD picker and never go back to watch the content. That's a lot of money that's being wasted. So MVPDs and the programmers, it's really the MVPD's responsibility, need to do a better job.
And there are technologies that Adobe's working on, like at-home authentication, passive authentication for devices, even whole device authentication. If we could make that work, that will help to improve that experience too, so people won't necessarily have to continually remember their credentials and log in constantly.
It's interesting, and Rick brought this up this morning. There's a lot of discussion about TV everywhere as a failure. Nobody remembers their Comcast login and password, but nobody talks about how hard it is to remember your Netflix password.
Yeah.
Why is it such a pain in the ass to remember your Comcast password, but everybody knows their Netflix password? I think it's temporary. I think people will get over it, and then things like auto authentication and everything that the OATC is doing. That's another industry group that is looking at ways to automatically log people in. As well as device-specific stuff. If you can do something with the carriers like Verizon or AT&T to embed stuff in the plan to authenticate, there's other ways to do it. So I do see that improving, which is good for advertisers and good for the broadcasters.
So, sorry, Dom. No, okay. So we've been talking primarily about ad-based ways of monetizing video. I guess TV everywhere adds another layer, which is stickiness of your cable subscription or whatever is kind of a form of monetization. Beth, what are some of the other ways of monetizing video beyond advertising?
Well, there's the a la carte versus there's free, there's pay as you go a la carte, and then there's subscription based. And I think it just depends on, I think right now they're all viable models. I think it just depends on who you are and what you're doing. The New York Times just carved out video from their paywall and said, yeah, you have to pay every month to consume 10 articles, but video is separate. So I think some of the traditional publishers are trying to, who are, interestingly enough, subscription paywall, are trying to go free. And then you've got, YouTube who created a subscription model, to go paywall. And then you've got the iTunes and the Amazons and those guys who are, are doing some of the a la carte stuff. So I think there are pros and cons, to each. I think it just depends on, what the ultimate outcome is, for a la carte. It's easy because you can do offline viewing. I think it's more for, millennials, younger demographics. The guys that are binge watching, it's probably a preferable option. For those of us who haven't cut the cable cord yet, it might not be as preferable. So, there's that whole sort of subscription, non-subscription, a la carte, free with ads, models. And I think they're all viable right now. I think it just depends on how it all gets rolled out and how it's all adopted. But I think right now it's everything goes from my perspective.
Right. And Comcast has started offering some electronic sell-through titles where you can purchase and download and have on your mobile device a program, which I would love more of that personally. But
yeah.
What do you think, particularly Micah and Dominic, around these other forms of user-paid monetization? What's the potential? What's growing? Where do you see the market moving there?
Sure. I mean, I think there's all of those models in terms of ad-supported with no paywall. Subscription-based with or without ads, or transactional where you're just paying to download and be able to have that sort of mobility without ads. I think all those work with the right value proposition for the user. And so, on the EST side, when we work with iTunes and Amazon and Xbox and those guys, I feel like we have a really good business. It's a strong and growing business, and that fits a certain consumer demand. They want their content when and where, and so that's been great for us. The ad-supported business, certainly bigger. I think a lot of users, if they're connected, will choose to watch with ads versus paying per episode. But we're happy to be able to serve all of those sort of user cases. And then we're also seeing, and we've done some things on the subscription side, for people where you offer them the right sort of extra content or sort of enhanced experience. I think the best example we had was last summer. We have this sort of Big Brother for our summer series, 24/7 live feeds. The most passionate of the fans subscribe. Last year was the first year that we brought it in-house. It's $9.99 a month, or $25 for the season, and we had some great uptick. We grew the product from the prior year quite considerably by bringing it in-house, and we had over 10 million hours streamed. So some really good engagement, meeting that sort of specific consumer demand for those passionate fans of a certain show.
Yeah, I mean, I think really the content is what has to drive it. I mean, if you have the content that people, there's some content people are just not going to pay for because that's the history of television, right? They're just used to getting it for free and they accept the advertising. If you can package up your library in a way, or offer them additional content that in a way that you can do, a subscription VOD product, then I think there's some sex. I don't think anyone's been probably more successful at it, correct me if I'm wrong, than WWE, which is really, has a rabid fan base. They've got content people want, and they can charge for it that way.
Very successful.
It's important to note that monetization models vary by country significantly. This is a very US-centric worldview. Outside the US, in Europe particularly, pay-per-download is really big, and I'm always surprised to learn that the Germans and the Spanish and the Italians love the pay-per-show model. Like, they'll pay €2 to download an episode of Shark Week or whatever. I mean, that's not something that we usually think about in the US. It's always, the economic relationship between the MVPD and the programmer. But outside the US, there's a lot of direct programmer to consumer sales, and they're I wouldn't say they're making money hand over fist, but they're making some money. Direct download.
Right. And do these mentioned that these different models, the user-paid models, work for some genres better than others, and you gave some great examples. Are there other kind of rules of thumb when you think about your portfolio of content and what you can monetize in different ways? Are there certain genres where you say, okay, this is going to be ad-based? Others where you say, we could charge on a pay-per-use basis? How do you think about that?
I know for us, I think it's probably more somewhat about the content, but also largely around windows in terms of, I think for us in the current window, when it's on broadcast, I think the ad-supported model is the most important for us. And then I think as that shows shift in terms of being on air for several years, you see expanded distribution. The syndication models still exist and are very healthy with just new sort of digital buyers in the space. So I think we look at it, the modeling really more over the windows versus picking one model for a certain piece of content.
Right. Same thing,
Yeah,
Monica?
I would totally agree with that, yeah.
So more Windows-based and extracting as much value. So a key part of monetization then is knowing where you are in the life cycle of the content and the different ways you could monetize depending on how new it is. And so that comes into play as well.
It's interesting. We work with PBS, which is obviously a nonprofit, and they don't do a lot of pre-roll. They have some, but they do have a VOD product where the first season, for example, of Downton Abbey is free for PBS, subscribers that donate, and then seasons like 2 through 5 you pay for. So I still think it's something that, from a window perspective, is they also sort of are in sync with that model as well.
And I think that in terms of content, when you have something like highly serialized, being able to give somebody the reason to sort of sample it. I know we do it a lot on the EST platform, giving away pilots, trying to get people to at least sample the content and let engage. Very important, I think, for the serialized stuff. Yeah.
How do you, moving back to the challenges, we talked about some technical challenges, some challenges around advertisers and inventory. What other challenges exist? Like if you could say, all right, I just want to be able to monetize my video online, and here are the barriers to growth in our business.
You mean other than Nielsen?
Exactly, yeah. Other than measurement, so we got measurement, technology. I guess inventory is a challenge still as well in selling campaigns. But are there cultural barriers in the advertiser or agency community? Are there internal cultural barriers that content producers face? What are some of the other challenges?
I was just going to say, I would drive home the issue about analytics and measurement. I think it's so key right now. I mean, particularly when you're talking about consumption that's growing on mobile and portable devices. I mean, advertisers and marketers are scrambling to understand not just the basic demographics, but really sort of the you got a device that can identify a location, can track a person, and yet there's no way to necessarily serve up a customized piece of advertising that syncs either with that content or that viewer. So I know from the clients that we're working with, like Black Arrow, which is for whom we've helped build their advertising platform, and then like for PBS. I mean, I think it's measurements and analytics. People are desperate to understand, what does this data mean? How do we collect this data? Can we get the depth of data and the granularity to really identify viewers? And then obviously, how do you target towards that viewers? And I think until such time as it might be Nielsen, but it might be a whole host of other players out there that can I think that's the holy grail right now in terms of understanding how to truly monetize, is understanding who your audience is, what they look like, what they like to eat, what they like to do, and when they're watching. And then I think it all goes back to that seamless experience. I mean, wouldn't it be great if you can capture someone who's watching, Deadliest Catch, on their TV, and then follow them, since most people are multitasking when they're watching, with a tablet, having a lean back experience while they're on their tablet, when they get up to go to the refrigerator to get, a glass of soda. And how do you tie those experiences together, not just from a content perspective, viewing perspective, but from an advertising perspective? Absolutely. So I think those are really key issues we need to, hopefully will be addressed soon.
Yeah, I think for us, definitely knowing our audience better, both to deliver sort of the customized and personalized experience from the content perspective, but also targeted advertising. I think, for all the benefits of measurement and being able to sell across platforms with that Debomet verification, it also introduced the model of wasted impressions that exists on TV. But given that we're digital, given that we can know more about our audience, influence the targeting dynamically upon serving the ad, I think we're really focused on trying to understand who our audience is so that we give them the best possible experience, as well as delivering for our advertisers the best experience in terms of all of their impressions, or as much of their impressions on target to the demo they're interested in reaching without a lot of waste.
We've created this expectation that, because it's internet and it's real-time feedback, you will be able to provide all of that information to the advertisers, but we're still not there. And I hate to echo what everyone else said, but it is still Nielsen. It's still Nielsen is is the challenge, but also, what we need to be able to move that ball forward.
I have a question for the programmers. How significant, or is it still the case that the digital and the linear ad sales guys are talking a different language, where linear is talking about GRPs and audience, and digital is talking about impressions and doing a blended CPM with your display, and those people don't even talk the same language or like each other. They're in a different office. One's in New York, one's in San Francisco. Is that still the case, or is that sort of going away?
I think with each passing year, those teams are working more and more closely together, starting to understand each other's languages. And I think also for us, by sort of introducing dynamic ad insertion for VOD this year, having that's sort of the sort of intersection of broadcast model versus internet model, and I think that's really brought our sales teams even closer together to understanding and working together.
Yeah, and we've organized our sales teams in a way that it's not a us and them situation anymore. They're really working embedded together. A lot of companies have done this so that while you have your expertise on the various platforms, you can go to an advertiser with a full package, and everyone is in sync there, which is before you'd have multiple people calling on different on the same advertiser and talking in different languages. So.
And what about with the advertisers using the agencies themselves? Do agencies still have a us and them barrier, or separate agencies? How, what are you seeing there? Is that a barrier?
I'm smiling because, when I first started working in mobile, 10 years ago, there was such bifurcation in the agencies. You had sort of, you had the online world and digital that didn't include mobile, and then you had mobile, and within some of the largest agencies, neither of the two were talking, and it was really hard to get their attention. So I've been out of that space for a while, but I would venture to guess that it would be remiss of the agencies to not have consolidated that at this point, but I don't know. You guys might have a better sense.
There's still challenges there, I think.
Yeah.
They're moving in that direction too. I think it's a matter of speed. So.
Yeah. Well, and it's because my assumption is, just as before, the advertisers are clamoring for it. So they're showing up at their agency saying, "I want one buy across all platforms. Give it to me."
Yeah.
And so the agencies are scrambling, and a lot of times, I know what I found is that the agencies don't even have the capability necessarily to do the creative across all the platforms. So you've got to outsource creative development for a single campaign that runs across all connected devices. So it's my experience is it's still fragmented, but hopefully we're getting closer and closer.
Yeah, the agency will do whatever Procter & Gamble tells them to do.
Yeah. Exactly.
So if P&G says we have $75 million and I want to spend it across digital and linear, tell me how to do that. The agency is going to come up with a way to do that. And it's working a lot better than it did 3-5 years ago.
The thing is, as you guys know, is that the creative doesn't always work, the same creative doesn't work across all platforms. So you really, just like content doesn't necessarily work in the same format across all platforms, it needs to be customized for that experience. So, that's the other challenge. I'm sure P&G wrote a check for $75 million.
That's a test budget.
Yeah, sorry. Digitas, whoever would jump to do that, but the reality is that the creative needs to drive conversion, engagement, and conversion, and the same creative that works in a linear format and might not work in another format. So I think it's up to the agency, the advertisers, to demand that those things resonate.
We've seen some success, taking the traditional creative approach out of it and doing more of a branded entertainment experience, a tentpole event like Puppy Bowl, where the advertiser is, they're on there, they're online, they're in every piece of that. That's a real, that's a real success story, and that's something that we say, we're taking one approach to how we do this. We're doing it everywhere in the agencies, and the advertisers come along. Yeah.
Great. We've got about 10 minutes left. Any questions from the audience? Either raise your hand where you are or speak into the microphone. Yes.
lose some of your client-side metrics, such as companion support or click-throughs or whatever else you can do client-side. Which of the two would you pick?
I don't really understand the question because you're implying that server side is somehow superior user experience, which isn't the case. So I think that there's a
There's some
perception
hybrids out
that
there.
there's a perception
hey,
that
Campbell?
server side is less
Could you do
engineering
sorry.
intensive.
Could you repeat the question? They asked
Sure.
me
The
if
question
people can't
is
hear.
basically how do you create the best user experience? I think that's what the takeaway is. I mean, if you had to boil it down, how would you rephrase that?
How do you balance the user experience with what your advertisers are demanding in terms of metrics, in terms of audience demographics?
Yeah, it's tricky. There almost always has to be something on the client, some client code, and you need to do that in a way that isn't battery intensive and doesn't drain the battery really quickly. So there's hybrid approaches to both the content and the ad streaming that combine server side and client side. So there's different things, and this is a really nascent part of the industry. So, and different companies have different engineering resources that they can dedicate to these challenges. So, but I'd love to talk to you more offline about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think for our perspective, it's a great question in terms of something we struggle with, especially in mobile today. And I think we're going to also see that translate as we move to more sort of, over-the-top boxes, things like Roku, all those sort of devices that present new technical challenges. And I think it's always going to be a compromise for us in terms of balancing the user experience while making sure that we're able to deliver the proper ad experience, get the metrics, make sure the advertisers are happy. But I think at the end of the day, it all starts with the user. If they're not liking the experience, if it's buffering too long, I mean, they're not going to come back. The metrics are no good if nobody's watching. Yeah. So I think that's where you got to lean.
The general rule of thumb, what we're hearing in the industry is server side is great for the CTO who says, I need to get to every device, including BlackBerry and Windows. Like, they just want to check the box to get to every device. Client side is great for analytics and measurement and also for scale. If you're doing a huge event where there's massive concurrence like March Madness, you need stuff on the client.
Wait, another question here.
Yeah, Jim Nail from Forrester. I'm going to take us all the way back, particularly to talk to Domenico and Micah. You talked about having the 360 view across the platforms and basically rolling all of these things back up into a single buy. So let me play a little devil's advocate. Isn't that lowering things to the lowest common denominator, especially given the demographic skews of viewership on these different platforms? And should advertisers really be looking for that 360 buy, or should they be looking to get closer to the audience they really want?
I mean, I think for us, 360, I think you're right. It's what's common across all the platforms, which is why sort of the push for age and gender to make that sort of the common metric. I think that is important, but we sell still separately sort of digital buys and network buys, but at the end, the advertisers want to sort of roll that all together, and I think that's where the metric comes into play, but I do agree, you want to make sure that you're not losing sight of the opportunity that each platform presents for the advertisers.
Yeah, that approach shouldn't limit you. I mean, it shouldn't keep you from doing what you need to do to reach specific, advertising targets as well, right? So you can take that approach on in some ways, and then other places it doesn't make as much sense. So.
Yes, another question.
Okay, I have a question. I follow all the time when, for example, Apple do the keynotes and they show their new products. I think that there are not many people involved with or searching or looking for the PR companies of very big companies through technological or banks that people can monetize the launching of new products. For example, abroad US, there is people is thirsty to get news and have the last minutes and live experience for knowing what is launching in the US for new products like Galaxy S5 or whatever, like Microsoft. Well, basically, I have an experience in Latin America, in Venezuela. I just started the streaming in October. I started to look for public relations agencies, Boston, Maston Biller, Huawei, companies like Huawei, Microsoft, Movistar, and local companies. So basically, because they don't have too much presence in the regular TV, they need more like 1 hour, 2
Sorry,
hours.
could you ask a question?
Yes. Basically, is there any different experience than Apple keynote that probably streamers are doing for another events, like taking the customer, like a big customer like Samsung or Microsoft, or launching products, and receive the payoff for the advertisement
All right,
and the streaming?
so I think what you're asking is there an opportunity to broadcast product launch events and charge money for that?
Yes, actively from the big company customer. I think that this is an opportunity. I don't know if there is experience here, but I think because I have limited resources where I am from, I think I
All right,
see
so
a big.
let me try to generalize the question.
Okay.
Take a shot at it here. Things other than traditional content events. Is there an opportunity to monetize those? Beyond. And I guess it goes back to live, and maybe what are the differences in live? I'll try to generalize your question.
I mean, I think it's just, is there an audience for it? I think is probably the first question we'd ask. I mean, we experiment at CBS Interactive with tons of live content, for technology product launches, our CNET brands. We do a lot of live streaming, a lot of coverage of those events, and there is demand for that. So I think there is, the opportunity, and the first part of that equation is the audience, and I think everything else will sort of fall into place after that.
Yeah, I mean, we're not focused on product launches, but we do look at live as a way to extend the viewing experience and the brands. So we launch products like Animal Planet Live, which is an extension of Animal Planet's brand. We've launched on multiple devices, on Samsung, on Roku, on Xbox. It's live animal cams, right? But it's sticky, it's monetizable, and it extends the Animal Planet brand without interfering with the linear programming. We've done the same thing with a lot of our discovery programming, where we'll start a program on air and continue it online, so to provide that added value.
Great examples. Okay, I guess we have time for one last question, if there is one from the audience. All right, well, we're right up against lunch here, so I think we're done. Please join me in thanking our panelists.